is great to be with you. I have never had a hype video like that. Can I get a copy of that for my kids later on today? But this is great to be with you. And the work of Hope International that I do around the world is trying to invest in entrepreneurs as we proclaim and live the gospel. And we are a group of people. Are we good on the audio? We are a group of people that do not believe that business and mission are two different conversations. We see them as integrated, and it is so much fun, whether it's traveling around the world or being here to have these conversations today. In a few weeks, I'm going to be in Ukraine and trying to figure out how do we encourage the entrepreneurs who are now in a moment of rebuilding their nation. So whether it is Ukraine or whether it is here in my home of Lancaster County, it is good to be with you and good to be with so many friends that I see here today. So I was asked to talk about rooting for rivals. And when you hear that word rival, how would you define the word rival? And I know it's morning, but I'm going to need some interaction here this morning. So I hope you're going to be leaning in. But what is a rival? How would you define the word rival? Austin, how would you define the word rival? Yeah, competitor, to be in competition with. That's what it is. You're a rival. There is an us and there is a them. There is our team and there is the other team. And when you think of rivalries, what do you see as some of the great rivalries, whether it is in business or in other areas in sports? When you hear the word rival, who comes to mind? Again, this is a moment for you to lean in with me this morning. But when you hear that word rivalry, who do you think of? Yankees, Red Sox. Oh, and you're with the Red Sox, right? Just wait a minute for a photo that's coming up. Just hold on that. Yes, so the Yankees, Red Sox, absolutely. Any other ones come to mind? Yes, all right. Yeah, Barcelona, Real Madrid. There are so many great areas. I grew up in Massachusetts, but living here in Pennsylvania, I've been living here for 18 years. And I have come to love this part of the world, to love this state, to love these people. And I have also adopted some of the teams. But I was in Houston not long ago, and I was with an individual that came to Philadelphia for one of the games. And he said, Peter, Philadelphia is not the city of brotherly love. He said he has never heard some of the things that he heard coming to our wonderful state, or had things thrown on him. And there have been articles even about the children that are being trained as what it looks like. I don't know if you saw the viral video that went of a Phillies fan taunting the Astros. So at 5 years old, children are being taught how you treat your rivals. That is what they are taught. Train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. This is not necessarily the right way to train kids, but I think there's something fun about a great rivalry. And again, I grew up in the 80s in Boston, and just this opportunity to cheer every year for my team and to know that there was going to be a great playoff series with the opposing team. And I love that you brought that up. I thought I'd have a picture of the other wonderful Red Sox and Yankees rivalry. I love that. I love a good rivalry. Went to college at Messiah University, and every year I played soccer there, and there was always a one game against another school, Elizabethtown, and people would bring marshmallows, and it was always, the excitement was just ramped up. But it's not just in sports, it's in entertainment, it is in politics. There's something wired deep within us that says, I want to know who my team is. I want to wear the jersey, and I want to have a definition of my team versus another team. And there's something that is fun in that environment. But the question is that us versus them? Is that the healthiest posture in the work that we are trying to do? Because rivalries are not just constrained to the athletic fields or the entertainment. But I started my work working for an organization that was called World Relief. And the question that I was asked more than any other was, Peter, how are you different from World Vision? Now, what's another way of asking that same question? When someone say, how are you different from, what would be another way of interpreting that same question? What was at the heart of that question? Yeah, compare. Make an argument for your organization or for your business, by making an argument against the other. What would be another way of what are some of the questions that would be within that line? When you say compare or competition, what are some of the questions? Tell me how you are different, better, bigger. Are you both necessary? We're the only ones that really matter, right? And sometimes, even with individuals that are trying to follow Jesus, it's easy to put a veneer of nicety on it, but at the core, to be doing something that might actually be undermining both of you. Comparison is a dangerous game. I work for Hope International, and even today, people will still say, Peter, how are you different from, and then fill in the blank with another organization that is doing economic development or missions around the world. Tell me how you're different. And we do this even within our churches. A friend sent me an article, it was an advertisement in a local newspaper, and the advertisement said this. It was an advertisement for a church, and the headline was this: is your church boring? Well, then come check out ours, Sunday morning, 9:45. What is going on that? But the idea that even in an advertisement to invite people into church, it would be done in such a way that it would be by tearing down another. Us versus them. Our team versus the other team. And I love how Mark Twain says it. He says, comparison is the death of joy. So you want to know how to have no joy in your work? You want to have no joy in your ministry? You want to have no joy in the way that you are thinking about your living out your faith? Become obsessed with comparison. Become obsessed with saying not just what's happening within our organization, but let me focus so much about what's happening on the other. When I started with Hope International, I had a graph on my wall. And the graph on my wall was a growth chart between Hope International and the other organizations that are in similar spaces. Now, what did that do? If our growth rate suddenly went up a little bit, what do you think that made me feel? Look at us, we must be doing something right. Nothing good comes from a root of pride. And yet that's what it was. It was this inflation. I'm comparing myself to them, and if things are a little bit up, look at me, I must be doing something right. And then conversely, if our growth rate went down a little bit compared to the other, oh, what is going on? I really do believe Mark Twain was right. There is no joy. There is no joy. There is no delight when we become so focused or even obsessed with comparison. But Mark Twain was really paraphrasing what Jesus said. Jesus said it a little bit more directly, and Jesus said this, Matthew 12:25. He said, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. Abraham Lincoln quoted this same verse with a little bit of a twist on it, but this idea that a house divided will not stand. A house divided, when you attack the root, when you attack the way that brothers and sisters are together, if you can attack that root, you will have no fruit. And Jesus knew this, and he addressed it so directly. If we become focused, if there is division, if there is comparison, there is a deep crack in the foundation. And yet the world today, and even followers of Jesus, how well would you say we are doing having that picture of a house united? How well are we doing having a unified picture to the world that if Jesus is in common, look out world, because we are on the same team. How well are we living that out? You know, I find it absolutely amazing. This is not the only time that Jesus talked about this issue of unity. The night before he went to the cross, he prays for his disciples, and then he prays for you and me. He prays for those who believe in him through the message that is carried on the disciples and reached us in this room. He prays for us. And what was the specific prayer that Jesus was praying for the night before he went to the cross? It's the same prayer. John chapter 17. Prayed that they would be brought, they would be one, just as we are one, I and them and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. And Jesus says there's a lot riding on this. The next phrase, then the world will know that you have sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. Our witness to the world hinges on the way that we treat and interact with each other. There is a lot at stake in getting this right. And can I just say, I don't see any disclaimers in these words of Jesus. This picture of being brought to complete unity. I don't see him saying it's only for people that are in vocational church ministry. I don't see him saying it's only for individuals that do international missions. I don't see any disclaimer on this. I think this prayer is for you and me and how we treat each other, regardless of the sector. If we're in the marketplace, there's no pass. There's no exception on this. This is for all of us to be invited into this picture of what would it look like if we were brought to a place of complete unity. And my guess is that is hardest to apply with individuals that are closest to us. There's something about a sibling rivalry. There's something about those that are closest to us. We don't feel like we compare ourselves to people far away or organizations that are outside of our sector. Typically, it is most difficult to apply with individuals that are closest to us. So in this room, what would it look like? What would it look like if we actually lived into that? If we actually lived into a picture of saying we are going to have a picture to the world, even in our variety of business ventures, we're going to have a picture of the world of a group of people that have Jesus in common, and we are going to be working hard to have this picture of beautiful brotherhood and sisterhood, this beautiful picture of unity in Christ. But in many ways, you don't need me to come up and make an argument for that. It is woven throughout Scripture, and we know the benefits of this. My guess is we know it. But sometimes there's a difference between what we know and what we do. And so what do you think is it? What is it that keeps us from a level of collaboration or that picture of unity? What is it that stops us from actually living into that? Turn to your neighbor, 1 minute. What is it that you think are the major barriers to actually living into that picture of unity? 1 minute, turn to your neighbor. Love to hear what you come up with. I'd love to hear what you come up with. What keeps us? What hinders us? What are the barriers? Pride, yeah, thank you. Yep, good. Envy, yeah. Scarcity, yeah. Distraction. Fear. Tunnel vision, yeah. Fear, scarcity, pride, tunnel vision. Isn't this a wonderful thing to talk about this morning, before 8:30 this morning, all of this? But there's a lot here. So just a little bit more background. So everyone, I guess, has hobbies. My hobby is whenever there's something that I feel like I'm having a real hard time with this, or there's a question that is unanswered. I love the book writing process because it is an excuse to go and have conversations. So you saw that I love writing books as a way of learning and exploring different ideas. And in many of the books, the writing approach is similar to what Jim Collins has in his book, Good to Great, where he reaches out to industry experts and says, who are the exemplars? Who are those individuals or organizations that really have a different piece? And then we try to find a counterfactual. We try to find an example that has a lot of similarities, but then reaches a different conclusion. So in this, we reached out to a variety of friends in the US and around the world, a variety of sectors, nonprofit, for-profit, and try to figure out, who are those individuals that live with a radical open-handedness and generosity and just get unity and collaboration. And then we would go and spend time with them, and we tried to figure out what are the themes, what are the common issues that they have in common that makes them have a different approach, different belief, different action in the way that they approach this. And so we interviewed a lot of individuals. We spent over 200 hours interviewing individuals trying to understand this question. What is it? What is it that would lead to a different posture in how we treat each other? Who are those individuals that root for the rivals, and what is it that they believe, and what is it that they do? And I want to share just two themes that came up again and again and again and again. And this is my answer to the question, what keeps us from collaboration? But the first, they're two worldview questions, actually, because our beliefs inform our actions. So we're going upstream this morning to say these two beliefs will shape the way that we treat each other. But the first one is this: do you believe that we live in a world of scarcity or abundance? Now, why does that matter? Well, what is your attitude if you believe that we live in a world of scarcity? What would your approach be to other organizations or other ventures if you believe that there's just not enough to go around? If you believe we live in a world of scarcity, what would be your approach? How would that impact this conversation? Yeah, not enough for everyone, so get what you can. Hold on to it. Good, good. How else would you see this impacting this conversation? Roger, how would it impact?
I was thinking of keeping it private, being willing to share.
Yes, yeah. Closed fist or open hand, it does. Now, again, this attitude of scarcity or abundance, this is not dependent on the sector. It doesn't matter the venture. It doesn't matter if you're nonprofit or for-profit or anything. And one of the examples of this is this individual. Does anyone know who this gentleman is? He is a titan of business. He's an individual that is known as the founder of a fast food chain. Does anyone know who this individual is? Ray Kroc, yeah. And Ray Kroc is known as founder of McDonald's, exactly right. So McDonald's, right? And do you think he was an individual that believed in scarcity or abundance? There's some fascinating books that have been written about him, but he was the definition of a cutthroat capitalist. And if you look at the core, he couldn't stand that there would be any room within the fast food industry for anyone other than himself. He believed, even though he was trying to grow his company, he had a scarcity mindset. It was him. The world was not big enough for anyone else other than him. And this is one of his quotes. He said this: "If any of my competitors were drowning, I'd stick a hose in their mouth and turn on the water. This is rat eat rat, dog eat dog. You're talking about the American way of survival of the fittest." That's a great expression right there. This man would benefit from some counseling, I believe, on that. But that's sort of an approach, and not only to think that, to actually say it, there's a little bit of a filter that's broken on that as well. But he just couldn't stand. And if you actually look at the story, he wasn't the founder. The founder of McDonald's were these two brothers, and he put them out of business. He literally put his store across the street to put them out of business because he couldn't stand anyone else having any market share whatsoever. He wanted to destroy the competition. And this sort of an approach, this sort of a piece, I believe it's really rooted in a belief that there's just not enough for anyone other than me. And I love how you said fear, because I think this really is rooted in fear. This fear that there's not going to be enough. So we hold on to everything. You know, I just love that I had an apple this morning. And I love when I eat an apple, I'm reminded of God's economics. Because what is at the center of every single apple? And how many other apples are in that one seed? Okay, you might know more about apples than I do. My answer is a lot on that. That's a good point. But if you take care of that seed, the potential is a lot of apples from that one. I love God's economics, and I just don't believe that our God is a God who lacks. I believe our God is a God who uses expression throughout Scripture to say, don't worry, I've got you. There is enough. And if we believe that, we no longer have to hold on with a closed fist. We can start to live lives of open-handedness. But, you know, this issue of do we believe in a world of scarcity or abundance, it's not just Ray Kroc. I believe it spills over into the space that I'm in as well. And I had an interesting example a little while ago where there was a devotional that we did led by one of our leaders from Rwanda. And he did a devotional built around Exodus 4:2, when God asked Moses, "What's in your hand?" And we created some curriculum. We had a devotional that we were sending out. And the day that we released a video, I got a call from another nonprofit leader who said, "Peter, you got to stop that video. You got to stop using that." And I said, "Why? Like, tell me more." And it turns out that they had trademarked Exodus 4:2. Now, I kind of thought the Bible was open source. I kind of thought it was a message to be shared. But the question is, why would you trademark a Bible verse? Why would you do that? And turns out they had filed for a trademark, had not been granted, because it does turn out, indeed, if you're wondering, you cannot trademark a Bible verse on that. But the question is, why would you do that? The question is, why would you do that? And I think the answer is rooted to this worldview. If you do not believe there's enough, you want to hold on to everything you have. You want to hold on to every aspect, and you want to hold on because you don't want anyone else to get a piece. Now, just to be really clear, with this organization, 3 months later, there was a third organization that sent out their newsletter, and they were also using Exodus 4:2, and it was used in a similar way. And my immediate response when I got their newsletter was, they're using our verse. So it's something in all of us that very quickly causes us to hold on, And life does not happen when we hold on with a closed fist. And I love that it is possible, I believe, to have a worldview not of scarcity, but of abundance. And to remind ourselves again and again, God has got enough. God has enough for all of us of what he's called to do. And in the space that I live with nonprofit organization, fundraising is a place that we feel this most acutely, of saying, is there enough or not? But I love how Melissa Russell, she leads the fundraising team for the International Justice Mission, and she had a friend come to her when this was happening. Does anyone remember this? Ice Bucket Challenge. And there was so much attention. And what was the Ice Bucket Challenge raising money for? ALS, exactly. And it just took off. Everyone seemed like they were dumping ice water on their heads. And a friend came to her and said, Melissa, I wish all of this attention was for you and IJM right now. In a worldview of scarcity, that makes sense. If there's limited amount of attention, then focusing on ALS, having that take off, means less of a focus on the work of IJM. But Melissa had a wonderful response, and she said, imagine if you had a family member with ALS, and for the very first time in your life, you felt like the world saw. Imagine how that would make you feel. Let's join in on that. And then she said this. She said, I believe in a God who took 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed the multitudes. And you know my favorite part of that story? My absolute favorite part of that story is what happened at the end after the feeding of the 5,000. What happened? Leftovers. Leftovers, basketfuls of leftovers for the disciples. 1 basket for each of the disciples, as if there was a giant exclamation point of saying, God is not short. God does not lack. It was not just enough to feed the 5,000, but literally leftovers, basketfuls of leftovers. I think that is amazing. So this worldview question, do we believe in abundance or scarcity, that will impact how we treat each other. And I would just encourage us, keep going back. Keep going back to the source. And my guess is the more that we understand a limitless God, the more we are going to live into a way that says, God has enough. We don't have to fight over these small pieces. So that's the first thing. First question that we heard again and again is this question of, do we believe in a worldview of abundance or scarcity? And I would encourage you, choose abundance. Choose abundance. Second question that we heard again and again is our primary loyalty to our club or to the kingdom of God? Who are we loyal to? What at the end of the day is our loyalty? And I found it so interesting that if we believe that our loyalty is to our organization, we are going to make decisions that maximize the good for our venture, for our organization, even if it undermines a grander mission that we're invited into. This matters. The question is, where is the bounds of our loyalty? Is it to our organization or is it to Jesus? That matters. But I find this popping up in all kinds of really interesting examples, but even in the world of politics on that. But I found it really interesting that after a contentious election, that there was a letter that was left in the Oval Office that was written by George Bush, written to Bill Clinton. And at the end of this letter, there's a fascinating thing that he said. He said, "Your success now is our country's success. I am rooting hard for you." I find that amazing that after a contentious election, he said, I am holding the good of our nation above our differences. That is crazy talk on that. And if that is true in the world of politics, how much more is it true for followers of Jesus? How much more might it be true that if we have a higher allegiance? And I love the work that I do with Hope International. It's not saying we don't really care about the work, but it's saying that logos and egos can get in the way of kingdom impact if we're not careful. If we think our allegiance is to an organization instead of to our God, we are going to make decisions that are going to undermine the grander and bigger and better mission that we're being invited into. Or as Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek first the kingdom of God." I am not to seek first the work of Hope International. You are not to seek first the work that you are doing in your companies. We are called to a higher allegiance, to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That is our allegiance. That is our mission. That is what we are invited into. I love looking at 2x2s. I love trying to have two different ideas on the same graph, four different quadrants, and I think kind of applying this. This is where we now move from worldview to application. But these two questions, are we going to choose to be people who are about the kingdom or our club? Are we going to be people who are about a worldview of abundance or scarcity? That will have very real implications in how we lead and how we treat each other. I believe that there's a way of looking. If we are about the club and about a scarcity mindset, that means there is not enough for everyone, so hold on to everything that you have. Hold on. That inward focus will not only kill you as an individual, it will destroy the vibrancy of your organization. That inward focus that leads to narcissism is not where we see real exciting impact. But I think it's also possible to believe in a world of abundance, but to think about our club. Now that leads to hoarding. There's a lot out there, but it is all for me. It is all for me. So we stockpile, we build bigger barns, we try to hold on to everything that we have. But we can also be about the kingdom. But if we never think that there's enough, we end up in this quadrant of envy, of just resenting the successes of others, never being able to fully enter into the joy and celebration and picture of unity. No, those three quadrants, I believe there's an alternative. The alternative is when we choose to say, I'm going to be about the kingdom and I'm going to have a world view of abundance. I believe that is where the real movements are happening in our world. And I want to give you some examples, and then I'm going to be bold enough to invite you into that quadrant. I'm going to be bold enough to say the world will be changed if we live in that sort of a way, in that sort of an approach. So first example is from a Bible translation. Did you know that there was a foundation that several years ago received pitches for funding from three separate organizations to translate the Bible into the same language for the same people group? And they had no idea that anyone else was working on this. Three organizations, three different approaches, without any knowledge that anyone else was working on this. That's inefficient at best, right? That's not maximizing. So as these organizations were on their own, they believed that the Bible was going to be translated into every language on earth by the year 2150. This is in 2018. A few funders got together. 10 translation agencies started meeting together, praying together, growing in relationship. They met together every month at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Guess when the Bible is going to be translated into every language on earth because of this radical posture of open-handed generosity and collaboration? What year do you think that's going to happen? 2033. They took 117 years off the pace of progress because they said, we're in this together. This is not just an isolated example, though. There are so many examples. This posture of collaboration, of open-handed generosity, the movements that are happening in our world are being fueled by people that are in this quadrant. Our family has been involved in foster care, and did you know that there are now regions of the country that there are 0 kids waiting for a safe home because a group of organizations asked a different question, not how do we grow our organization, but how do we clear the list? How do we make sure that no one is waiting for a home? They had a collaborative effort, and More Than Enough became the platform to do that. And now there are counties in the U.S. that there are 0 children waiting for a safe home, and I love that. It's happening in clean water. Instead of asking the question, what is our strategic plan for our organization? There's a group of organizations that are coming together, and the question that they're asking is, how do we make sure every individual on earth has access to clean water as quickly as possible? That's a better question. That results in far better impact. They're open sourcing information. The Global Water Center was created to share collaborative efforts. It was designed to find that. It's happening within refugee resettlement programs. Instead of asking, what can our organization do? The question is, how do we make sure refugees fleeing violence are taken care of, and they're doing it together? In the space that I'm in, the Christian Economic Development Network, we've changed the question from what's happening in our space to how do we make sure extreme poverty is eliminated within our lifetime, and the church is at the forefront of that effort. That's a different question that leads to far bolder, far better responses. So I think about this word of rival, and I think about what it would look like if we replaced that word rival, if we just did aside with it, and we said, let's replace that with friend. Let's replace that word with friend. Let's realize that we are in this together, and can I say that is why today matters. You can get the content from any of the speakers. You can get the content from books and other things on YouTube. You cannot get the relationships around your table anywhere else other than being here in person, and I'm so glad that you're here. But I would encourage you, what would happen if together, your industry, your sector, what would happen if you said, yep, let's transform our sector. Let's grow in relationship. Let's open-handedly share. Let's figure out what this looks like. And let's see this world radically impacted for Christ. So my question is, what's one thing that you might consider doing today to root for your rivals? What's one thing that you might do to grow into that posture of open-handed generosity? And if you need some primers, can I just say, I'm trying to live this out? The first thing is I'm prioritizing time. I never used to do this because there's always more to do than time to do it in our organization. But I said, I'm going to make sure that I am reaching out, growing in relationship, and I tithe my time outside of Hope International with other organizations in our space because we can't root for our rivals if we don't know them. So is it prioritizing our time with others? Is it actually changing our prayer life? And actually, maybe you as a company or maybe you as a small group, are you praying for God's favor and blessing on those organizations that the world would look at and say, that is your rival? Have you ever thought to pray for God's blessing on them? Have you ever thought of maybe taking the radical step of actually reaching out and saying with no other agenda, but how can I help you? How can I help you in the work that you're doing? And I believe with that sort of a posture, with those sorts of practices, I believe that there are movements that will happen in our lifetime. And I love this, how Jesus said this, and this is my blessing for all of you as we end the time here, but this is what I would love to see. In Matthew 5:9, it says this, you're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. Wouldn't it be amazing if that were true in your venture, in your business, and in your life? May God bless you in that work as we all root for our rivals. Thanks so much.